What if I told you that the walls of your room are not protecting you from the world, but actually trapping you inside a prison of your own making? What if the very act of staying home, of avoiding people, of retreating from life is not giving you peace, but slowly suffocating the most vital parts of who you are? What if the philosopher Alan Watts understood exactly why you feel safer alone, and why that safety is the most dangerous illusion you could possibly believe? Picture this. You wake up on a Saturday morning and your phone shows a message from a friend inviting you to a gathering tonight. Immediately your chest tightens. Your mind starts racing through excuses. You could say you are feeling sick. You could claim you have work to finish. You could simply not respond and deal with the consequences later. The relief you feel when you finally type out that excuse and hit send is almost physical. You sink back into your pillow and tell yourself that next time will be different. Next time you will be ready. But deep down, you know that next time will feel exactly the same. Or maybe you recognize this pattern. You spend hours scrolling through social media watching other people live their lives while yours seems to be on permanent pause. You see friends traveling, celebrating, connecting. You tell yourself you prefer being alone. You convince yourself that you are an introvert, that crowds drain you, that small talk is meaningless. But late at night, when the distractions fade and the silence becomes too loud, you feel an ache that you cannot quite name, a hunger for something you have been denying yourself. Perhaps your avoidance looks different. You work from home not because it is more convenient, but because the thought of an office, of coworkers, of lunch conversations fills you with a dread you cannot explain. You order your groceries online. You let calls go to voicemail. You have perfected the art of existing without truly participating in life. And every day, the world outside your window feels a little more foreign, a little more threatening, a little more impossible to rejoin. If any of this resonates with you, I want you to know something important. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not fundamentally incapable of living like other people seem to live. You are experiencing something that Alan Watts spent his entire career trying to help people understand. And today we are going to explore exactly what that is, and more importantly, how you can begin to find your way back to a life that actually feels worth living. Research in psychology has consistently shown that social isolation activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Studies from the University of Chicago found that chronic loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%, a figure comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The human brain quite literally interprets isolation as a threat to survival because for most of human history being separated from the group meant death. Yet here we are, in an age of unprecedented connectivity, choosing to disconnect. Philosophers throughout history have wrestled with this paradox. The Buddha observed how suffering arises from our attempts to escape suffering. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the mind's tendency to create imaginary fears far worse than reality itself. But perhaps no modern thinker articulated the psychology of avoidance more clearly than Alan Watts. Alan Watts was born in England in 1915 and spent his life bridging Eastern philosophy and Western psychology. He became one of the most influential interpreters of Zen Buddhism, Taoism, and Hindu philosophy for Western audiences. But what made Watts truly remarkable was his ability to see through the games we play with ourselves. He understood that the modern human being is caught in a unique kind of trap, one that our ancestors never faced in quite the same way. Watts observed that we have become so identified with our thoughts, with our mental image of ourselves, that we have forgotten what it actually feels like to be alive. We live inside our heads, constantly rehearsing conversations that may never happen, replaying embarrassments from years ago, constructing elaborate fantasies about futures that will never arrive. And when the gap between our mental life and actual reality becomes too wide, we retreat, we avoid, we hide. The core insight that Watts brought to this phenomenon is both simple and revolutionary. The person who avoids the world is not avoiding the world at all. They are avoiding themselves, Or more precisely, they are avoiding the experience of themselves in relation to the world. Every time you decline an invitation, every time you cancel plans, every time you choose the safety of your room over the uncertainty of engagement, you are not protecting yourself from external threats. You are protecting a mental image, an idea of who you are, from being challenged or disrupted. Watts called this mental image the ego. But he did not mean ego in the Freudian sense or in the popular sense of arrogance. He meant something much more subtle. The ego in Watts' framework is the persistent illusion that you are a separate, isolated being who must constantly defend itself against a hostile universe. It is the voice in your head that says you are not good enough, that others will judge you, that safety lies in withdrawal. Here is what makes this insight so profound. The ego that you are protecting does not actually exist. It is a construction, a story you tell yourself about who you are. And you have become so identified with this story that you will sacrifice actual living experiences to keep the story intact. You will give up friendships, opportunities, adventures, love itself, rather than risk having your self-image challenged. I want to pause here for a moment because I know that what we are discussing is not just theoretical for you. Right now, you might be recognizing patterns you have lived with for years, patterns that have shaped your choices, your relationships, your entire experience of being alive, patterns that no one else has truly seen or understood because you have kept them hidden, even from yourself. When was the moment you first realized that something was holding you back from fully participating in life? Was there a specific incident that triggered your withdrawal, or did it happen so gradually that you cannot pinpoint when the world started feeling like too much? I am genuinely curious about your experience because every story is unique, and yet they all share common threads. If you feel comfortable, share in the comments below. You might write something like, "I first noticed myself avoiding life when," and then describe that moment of recognition. Your honesty creates space for others who are struggling with the same patterns to feel less alone. Every comment here becomes part of a larger conversation about what it means to be human in a world that often feels overwhelming. And if you are not ready to share, that is completely fine too. Just know that as we continue, everything I am saying is directed at your specific experience. This is not abstract philosophy. This is about your life and the walls you have built around it. Watts developed his understanding of avoidance through decades of lecturing, writing, and personal exploration. He noticed that the people who struggled most with engagement were often the most intelligent and sensitive. They had developed rich inner worlds precisely because the outer world felt too harsh, too demanding, too uncontrollable. This was radically different from the prevailing psychological theories of his time. Freud might have traced avoidance to childhood trauma or repressed desires. Behaviorists would have focused on learned responses and conditioning, but Watts saw something deeper. He saw that avoidance was not a malfunction, but a natural consequence of a fundamental misunderstanding about who we are. The misunderstanding is this: we believe we are separate from the world, that there is a hard boundary between inside and outside, between self and other. From this belief comes fear. If I am separate, then I must protect myself. If I am isolated, then others are potential threats. If I am alone inside this body, inside this mind, then the world is essentially foreign and dangerous. But Watts argued that this separateness is an illusion. In reality, we are not in the universe, we are the universe. We are not observers of life. We are life itself observing. The boundary between you and the world is as arbitrary as the boundary between a wave and the ocean. The wave appears distinct, seems to have its own identity, but it is never actually separate from the water. In modern life, this ancient pattern of avoidance has found new expression. We have more ways to hide than ever before. You can work remotely, shop online, stream entertainment endlessly, maintain the appearance of social connection through carefully curated digital profiles while never actually being present with another human being. Social media, in particular, has created a paradox. We are more connected than any generation in history and simultaneously more isolated. We can know what hundreds of people are doing at any moment, but feel profoundly unknown ourselves. We can accumulate thousands of followers while feeling fundamentally invisible. The person who avoids the world by staying home is often highly active online. They may have elaborate digital lives, rich fantasy worlds, deep knowledge of obscure subjects. Their avoidance is not laziness. It is a redirection of energy into domains that feel safer because they can be controlled. Online, you can craft your image, you can delete comments you regret, you can log off when things get uncomfortable. Reality offers no such luxuries. From a psychological perspective, what happens when we chronically avoid is a narrowing of what Watts would call our lived experience. The nervous system is designed to adapt to challenges. When we face moderate stress and overcome it, we build resilience. When we face social situations and survive them, our brain learns that they are not actually dangerous. But when we consistently avoid, the brain never gets this corrective information. Instead, something insidious happens. The imagination fills the void, and the imagination, left unchecked, almost always tends toward catastrophe. You imagine walking into a party and everyone staring at you. You imagine saying the wrong thing and being mocked. You imagine rejection, humiliation, exposure. These imagined scenarios feel real to the nervous system. Your body responds with genuine fear to events that exist only in your mind. This is what Watts meant when he said that we are living in a world of illusions. Not that the external world is fake, but that we have overlaid it with so many mental projections that we can no longer see it clearly. The world you are avoiding is not the actual world. It is a world constructed by your fears, filtered through your insecurities, distorted by your past experiences. How do you recognize if you have fallen into this pattern of world avoidance? There are several signs that tend to appear. You feel relief rather than disappointment when plans get canceled. You have become an expert at generating excuses. You feel more comfortable with screens than with faces. You have relationships that exist primarily or entirely online. You find yourself rehearsing conversations extensively before having them or avoiding them altogether. You feel a persistent sense that life is happening somewhere else, to other people. You might also notice physical symptoms. A tightness in your chest when you think about going out. A heaviness in your body that makes leaving home feel like an enormous effort. Sleep disturbances. Because the anxiety about tomorrow keeps you awake, and the exhaustion gives you another reason to stay in. If you recognize yourself in these descriptions, I want to be very clear about something. This is not your fault, and it is not a permanent condition. The walls you have built can come down. The world you have been avoiding is waiting for you, and it is far less frightening than your imagination has made it seem. Watts offered several insights that translate into practical approaches for those who have withdrawn from the world. The first is radical acceptance of the present moment. Avoidance is always future-oriented. We avoid because we anticipate discomfort, rejection, failure. But the future does not exist except as a mental construct. The only reality is now. And in the now, in the actual present moment, you are usually safe. By practicing presence through meditation, through conscious breathing, through simply paying attention to sensory experience, we can begin to dismantle the anxious projections that drive avoidance. The second practice is what Watts called the backwards law. The more you try to force yourself not to be anxious, the more anxious you become. The more you demand confidence of yourself, the more insecure you feel. Instead, Watts suggested welcoming the fear, going toward it rather than away from it. If you feel anxious about a social situation, do not try to suppress the anxiety. Acknowledge it. Feel it fully. And then go anyway, bringing the anxiety with you like an unwelcome but tolerable companion. Third is the recognition that everyone is improvising. A major component of social avoidance is the belief that others know something you do not, that they possess some secret to easy interaction that you missed. Watts was emphatic that this is not true. Everyone is uncertain. Everyone is performing to some degree. Everyone is wondering if they are doing it right. When you realize that the confident people you admire are just as confused as you are, the playing field levels considerably. Finally, Watts emphasized starting small and starting now. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Now, today. One small act of engagement. A genuine conversation with a stranger. A yes to an invitation you would normally decline. A walk in a crowded place with your full attention on the experience rather than your anxious thoughts about it. The deeper philosophical implication of Watts' teaching on avoidance connects to his entire worldview. If the separate self is an illusion, then protecting it through withdrawal is ultimately futile. You cannot defend something that does not exist. And more importantly, you do not need to. The universe is not hostile to you because you are not separate from it. The people you fear are not other than you, are not. They are different expressions of the same consciousness, the same life force, the same cosmic dance. This is not mere philosophy. It is an invitation to a fundamentally different way of being in the world. When you truly understand that you belong here, that you have always belonged here, that there is no boundary between you and life itself, the fear that drives avoidance begins to dissolve. Not all at once, not completely, but gradually, persistently, like ice melting in the sun. Your challenge this week is simple but powerful. I want you to do one thing that you have been avoiding. It does not have to be dramatic. It does not have to be the biggest fear on your list. Just one thing. Say yes to an invitation. Make a phone call you have been putting off. Go somewhere you have been telling yourself you cannot go. And while you do it, pay attention. Notice that you survive. Notice that the reality is different from what you imagined. Notice that you are still you on the other side, perhaps a little expanded, a little more alive. If you have ever felt trapped by your own patterns of avoidance, you are not alone. This channel exists to explore these profound questions about how we can actually live rather than just exist. By subscribing, you join a community of people who are committed to understanding themselves more deeply and showing up for their lives more fully. Each week, we examine another aspect of human psychology through the wisdom of thinkers like Watts, exploring practical ways to break free from the mental patterns that keep us small. These are not surface-level tips, but deep investigations into why we do what we do and how we can do differently. I know how isolating it can feel when you are stuck in avoidance patterns. That is exactly why I create this content, to meet you where you are and walk with you toward where you want to be. Subscribe so we can continue this journey together. If something in today's video resonated with you, that recognition is significant. Your mind is showing you something important. Hit subscribe and let us discover what becomes possible when you stop avoiding and start living. I will be here, every step of the way. Share in the comments one insight from today that struck you personally. What you write might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Someone who is sitting alone in their room, wondering if things can ever change. Your words could be the beginning of their answer.